Hi, I'm Elizabeth at A Literary Princess, and today I am doing my top books of 2021. So these are not necessarily books that came out in 2021, although some of them did, but a lot of them are also backlist books. A lot of them are classics. They're just books that I read in 2021. I am going to have my top 10 new to me reads, but first we are going to do my top 3 rereads. I don't like trying to place my rereads in with the new to me books because usually I'm rereading my favorite books ever, and I don't think that's really fair because they all end up at the top. So let's get started. And I say I say 3, but I have 2 that I'm counting together because they're a series. This is the All for the Game series by Nora Sakavic. I actually only read the second 2 books of the trilogy. I reread the first one at some point in 2020, and then this summer I was in a big reading slump. I needed a comfort read. This series is my ultimate comfort read, so I was like, you know what, I'm picking up the next 2 again. Screw it. So we've got first The Raven King and then The King's Men. So these were both 5 stars from me, obviously. I adore them with my whole heart. Are they realistic? No. Are they ridiculous? Yes. Do I care? No. They follow Neil Jostin as he goes to play this sport Exy at Palmetto State University, but he is actually on the run from his mob boss father. And then when he gets to the school, it turns out one of the other students on the team is also involved in the mafia, and it just becomes this whole big thing. It's like I said, it's ridiculous. It's completely unrealistic, but it's so fun. I really love the relationships between all the characters. The team starts out very hostile towards each other, and then by the end of the series, it's like this found family dynamic, and I adore it. I love Neil. He is a sassy little bitch, honestly, and I adore him, and I adore his relationship with Andrew, who is the goalie for the team, who is short, potentially psychotic, and likes to carry knives. Like I said, it's ridiculous. It's just so fun, though. So I had a very good time with that. The next book is my second favorite reread, and these actually next 2 were really hard to rate because I love them both probably equally, but for different reasons. But for the sake of the video, I needed to put them in an order, so I did. And the first one, this one would be The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte, who is criminally underrated, and everyone needs to go out and read Anne Bronte because she gets forgotten because her sisters are so famous, and that's not fair because she's amazing. So The Tenant of Wildfell Hall focuses on this woman named Helen who marries this guy that she knows is kind of bad news, but she's all, I can change him. Spoiler alert, no she can't. So he is an alcoholic, he's cheating on her, he is abusive, he's turning their son against her, and she finally has enough of it, and she takes her son and she runs away. She leaves him, and that is just not done in the Victorian era. So the fact that we have this novel published in 1848 that is dealing with this is amazing. I love Anne Bronte's writing. I think she's just as talented as her sisters. Everyone's always going on about how feminist Jane Eyre is. This is the real feminist Bronte novel. This is fantastic. This was obviously a 5 stars. I reread it for my independent study on Victorian women novelists, and I actually got to introduce my supervisor to it because he hadn't read it before, which was really fun. And then my top reread, which is my favorite fantasy novel ever. This is Winter Song by S.J. Jones. This is about a girl named Liesel who is a violinist slash composer and who's kind of in the shadow of her brother, who's a very talented violinist, and then of her sister, who is very beautiful. and her sister is kidnapped by the Goblin King, and Liesl needs to go and get her back. So this takes Christina Rossetti's poem, The Goblin Market, the David Bowie movie Labyrinth, and The Phantom of the Opera, and combines them, and it's great. The writing is beautiful. The relationship between Liesl and the Goblin King is beautiful. I adore it. I adore it so much. So this was obviously a 5 stars. All right, and now we get into the top 10 new to me books. And standing at number 10 is another book for my independent study. This is Lady Audley's Secret by Mary Elizabeth Braden. This is so much fun. We've got murder, we've got false identities, we have insanity. This is great. We have places burning down. This is so much fun. It is a sensation novel from 1862. And it's just so fun. Oh my God. Braden knows how to write a plot. She knows how to make it exciting. This was probably one of my favorite books for the independent study. There's actually going to be a few more of them on here. I am so glad I finally got to read this. I've heard it mentioned a lot, but it just never came up in any of my classes. So I gave this 4 stars. All right, at number 9 is another one for my independent study, which I unfortunately don't have a physical copy of. This is Moths by Ouida, which I had never heard of until I was doing this independent study. This book is great. It's kind of a mix between a sensation novel and a New Woman novel. So we focus on this woman, Vere, who is the daughter of Lady Dolly. Lady Dolly is extremely materialistic, very vain, and her daughter is the exact opposite. She's very earnest. She is looking for the good in people. She doesn't care about clothes and things. She just wants to marry a good person, and Lady Dolly pushes her into marrying this absolute scoundrel of a Russian prince. So, and then there's a whole romance between Vere and this opera singer, and this book actually features the first woman in Victorian literature to get a divorce and then get remarried at the end. So that is very interesting. But I love this novel. I actually wrote my final paper on it. It was just so much fun. And when I was reading the criticism of it, a lot of people were like, of course, Ouida is very silly and ridiculous. And it's like, yeah, and that's why it's fun. And that's why stuff like George Eliot's Middlemarch isn't. People like fun. That's why it was popular. And we need to put aside these prejudices against fun literature and actually study it, because this was super popular in the Victorian era. This is what people were reading, and I think we need to pay attention to that. But I gave this 4 stars. There were some places that were kind of slow, but ultimately it was really great. At number 8 is another one from my independent study. This is Miss Marchbanks by Margaret Oliphant. Again, this was just super fun. The main character is Lucilla Marchbanks, and yes, I am aware the spelling does not look like it should be pronounced that way at all. It was very interesting dealing with that and learning how it was supposed to be pronounced. But so Lucilla is like Jane Austen's Emma Woodhouse times 20. She's matchmaking. She is like recreating the society in this town of Carlingford, all under the guise of I'm just trying to do what's best for my dear papa, which seems to be bullshit. It's so much fun. I had a great time. The writing is very engaging. Oliphant uses this mock heroic style, which was extremely funny and just a great time. I gave this 4 stars as well, and it's the other one that I wrote my final paper on. So I looked at the idea of silliness in Moths and Miss Marchbanks and how it is actually a form of female intelligence, and we just basically ignore it because sexism. But so I highly recommend this. So much fun, such a great Victorian novel. Standing at number 7 is another one that I don't have a copy of. I'm sorry. This is the graphic novel Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. I have seen snippets of the comics on Tumblr all the time, but I've never actually read them in order. So I was finally like, it was on sale, and I was like, you know what? I want to read this in order. So I bought the first volume. It was amazing. It's such a sweet story. I love the romance. This was a 5 stars from me. All right. Sitting at number 6 is Burnout by Emily Nagoski and Amelia Nagoski. I might have butchered the pronunciations there, sorry. So this is a nonfiction book. My doctor actually assigned me this for homework over the winter break last year. It is looking at burnout, particularly in American women, providing techniques for how to deal with burnout, how to deal with the stressors and the stress. It was great. This idea of the stress cycle, how to manage the monitor in your brain that regulates your emotions and the stress response, and then how our society makes it so that women are dealing with all this stress. This was incredibly helpful. I think some people will probably know a lot of the information in it. I personally didn't, and this just really helped me in a rough time. So I'm so glad my doctor recommended this to me. I gave it 5 stars. Next up, we have another graphic novel. This is Glasstown by Isabel Greenberg. This is subtitled as The Imaginary World of the Brontes. So this is like part historical fiction, part fantasy. And look at this cover. Oh my God, this art is beautiful. So this is focusing on the Brontes' imaginary childhood world of Glasstown that they made up stories and played in. And it kind of fuses it. We kind of go into the fantasy world. We see Charlotte Bronte kind of talking with some of the characters from the world after the death of her siblings. It was very interesting. I adored the art. I thought it did a really good job presenting the Bronte siblings as we actually know them historically. Like, it kept their personalities as far as we know of it. It kept with the historical events while bringing in this fantasy element and showing us the world of Glasstown and going over these stories, which I feel like we don't read them a whole lot anymore, but we do have little pieces of them, mostly from Charlotte. But a lot of the stuff on Glasstown and then their later worlds of Gondel and, oh my God, I'm completely blanking on Charlotte and Branwell's little world. That's terrible, I should know that. Angria, there we go. So Charlotte and Branwell later had a world called Angria, and Emily and Anne had Gondel. So I thought it did a good job bringing in these stories and kind of giving us the stories while also giving us the stories of the Brontes. And I adored it, 5 stars. Sitting at number 4 was None Shall Sleep by Ellie Marney. This was so fun. This is like kind of a horror thriller about these 2 students that end up being asked by the FBI to interview juvenile serial killers. And then basically the main character, Emma, ends up interviewing the guy who is like teenage Hannibal Lecter. It was great. Actually, on the back of my book, somebody calls it the YA Silence of the Lambs, and I think that's completely accurate. You can see a lot of homages to Silence of the Lambs, but it never feels like a ripoff. I thought this was so fun. I love the main characters. Simon, who is our Hannibal Lecter character, was so utterly creepy and fascinating. It was exciting, well-paced. You do have to suspend your disbelief for it a bit, but that's fine. It's a YA thriller. And it was just great. 5 stars from me. Right. Sitting in at number 3 was Across the Green Grass Fields by Shannon McGuire. This was the 6th installment in the Wayward Children series. So this focuses on a girl named Reagan who goes to this world called the Hooflands, which is filled with horse-like creatures, unicorns, centaurs, kelpies, all kinds of other things. I adored this. This is tied for my favorite book in the series with In an Absent Dream. And actually one of the things I love the most about this was that it kind of skewed younger. And I think it could actually be a really great companion piece to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, to talk with a child about the kind of this idea of these children being brought into this other world and then being put on the throne as the ruler of this other world. So there's some great conversation in there about that. There is representation of intersex people. Reagan is intersex and she learns about it, tells her best friend, and then her best friend betrays her and tells everyone at school, which is what ultimately leads to her going off into the woods to try to get home and coming across the door into the Hooflands. I thought this was so beautifully written. I love McGuire's work. Yeah, again, 5 stars, highly recommend it. I know some people didn't really like it as much as the other ones in the series. I think that might be because of the kind of younger feel of it, but again, that's what I really liked about it. So, all right, sitting at number 2 was Nervous Conditions by, I'm gonna butcher this, I'm so sorry, TC Remga? I'm so sorry. I can't pronounce anything. I'm sorry. So this was gorgeous. Oh my God. This was for my feminist theory class. It was the only novel we read, and I'm so glad that my professor assigned it because I never would have heard of it otherwise. It is a coming-of-age genre about this girl named Tambu who starts going to school to get an education, and then she's in Rhodesia, which is modern Zimbabwe. So she goes to school at like this mission school, and then she ends up going to this boarding school where there's mostly white girls. It was very interesting. It deals with the intersection of race, gender, and class. So we see a lot of the differences between her and her cousin, whose father is wealthy and are wealthy compared to Tambu's family, and who has been in England while her father got his degree, and kind of the difference between them, the difference between Rhodesian culture and like this kind of anglicized version that her cousin falls into. Oh, it was just so great. The difference between how Tambu is treated and her brother is treated. It was just so great. And then, of course, there's also the whole race thing. So how the white people in Rhodesia are treating the black people. It was just so interesting. It was so good, so well written, absolutely gorgeous. I think it needs to be taught like everywhere. I would have loved to have read this in high school. It's just great. And apparently it's considered an African literature classic, and I can totally see why. It's so amazing. So that was obviously 5 stars. And now we come to my number 1 book of 2021, and I don't think this will come as any surprise because I mentioned it in my December wrap-up. This is These Violent Delights by Micah Nemmer-Reaver, whose name I'm probably still mispronouncing. What more can I say about this? This book is gorgeous. The writing, gorgeous. The characters, gorgeous. Just the plotting is so well done. It's a debut novel. How? It's just great. I highly recommend it. Beautiful. So, those are my top books of 2021. I hope you enjoyed watching this. Please let me know if you read any of these books and what you thought down in the comments. And don't forget to check out my Tumblr and my blog down in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll chat with you soon. Bye.